Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. It is February 26th, 2023. My name is Nate Pike. I'm your host for tonight. We're going to be joined in a bit by the incomparable political strategist, overall great person, Sarah Biggs. But before we do that, we're going to do our weekly rundown of all things Alberta politics. Lot to talk about. Big day coming up, really big day coming up. Tuesday is going to be a huge day in Alberta politics, although a lot of the punches have already been telegraphed because Tuesday's budget day. So we're going to see a new budget from the provincial government, and they've already done quite a bit of sort of lead in into where the money's going to go, how it's going to be spent. But before we get into that, we got some other things that we need to maybe talk about, because yesterday, Danielle Smith, she went ahead and she had her radio show, and she had some things that she wanted to say, and particularly in regards to the conversation surrounding healthcare, which is unquestionably going to be a huge part of the budget. She had some interesting points that she wanted to apparently try, let's say, to make. One of those points had to do with a recent report that came from the Auditor General that, as you'll hear in the introduction to the question, really came down quite hard on private long-term care facilities. Smith's answer is pretty telling where the priorities are.
Going to move in Alberta, and for that matter, in other provinces, to address or supplement shortcomings in healthcare, to incorporate some contracted for-profit services into health delivery, to basically aid the pure publicly run system. Now, the report found proportionately more COVID outbreaks, cases, and deaths in the contracted for-profit facilities. Does that give you pause? How do you address that?
I guess the issue would be is that if you have a larger proportion of your facilities being private, then a larger proportion of the deaths are going to also be in private facilities. But I think one of the things I would say about private facilities is that they are the ones that are moving towards more individualized rooms. I think that they're very nimble in the way that they're able to operate. And I would say overall, if you look at how we compared to Quebec has some very serious problems, and they have the reverse. The bulk of their care centers are publicly funded. And so I think that we just have to make sure that we're not looking at this in isolation, that there's some obvious areas of improvement. But I certainly wouldn't draw the conclusion that our long-term care providers who are private are a source of any of the problem. I think that our long-term care providers are part of the solution. We need to have far more investment. We need to have far more investment in expanding out those facilities.
So Smith's pretty clear. We need far more investment in expanding out private long-term care facilities. There's some problems with her logic. She starts off by saying, well, if you've got a majority of private healthcare or private long-term care institutions, then of course you're going to have more deaths just because there are more of them. But that's not necessarily what the report said. The way that the question was introduced was very clear. Private for-profit long-term care facilities saw more deaths. That's it. That's the ballgame. You can try to play with the numbers as much as you want, but the reality is when you're pursuing for profit, when the motive is for profit, not the quality of care, but for profit, the focus is the profit. It's very telling, though, that Smith was very clear. What we need to do is we need more of these we need to invest more, which is a fascinating way to say we need to put more public dollars into private healthcare institutions, private long-term care institutions. But where Smith really showed her hand was when she was explicitly asked about one of the points that the NDP have been pretty aggressively attacking Smith on. A lot of the conversation that the NDP has had, they've been putting some money into advertising, where we've heard the NDP playing a clip where Danielle Smith talks about, hey, maybe we need to have a little bit of a user fee. Maybe we could charge people a little bit of money to access their GPs. Maybe people would be more responsible with their health care. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's the gist of what Smith has said on more than one occasion. And it's on video, so there's no real negotiating back and forth. Did she say it? Didn't she? It's all right there. Smith was asked explicitly to explain her position. And as you'll hear in just a sec, she pretty much did everything Well, she didn't answer the question in regards to user fees, but she made her position pretty clear.
Hi, good morning, Premier. My question is, I've heard the NDP advertising in their campaign on the radio that Danielle Smith wants you to pay for your primary
Health
to go
care.
to visit your doctor. Yeah, your primary. And what's going on with that? Like, I think you need to get in front of that kind of.
No, I understand. They've been saying this for years, quite frankly. And I must say that they were the ones who were charging $40 a day for people to access publicly funded care for mental health and addiction. And we eliminated those fees. So they don't have a lot of credibility on that. When they had the opportunity to eliminate user fees, they didn't. They kept them in place. So I'll put that on the table. The other thing is, my comments are always in the context of this idea that I have for a health spending account. Because one of the things that I have noticed is that we do not fund at all any of the things that keep ourselves well. And so the context of talking about a health spending account is we already have them at the provincial level. Rachel Notley has one. All of the public service has one. And so my view is, if we're going to be paying for this as taxpayers, why shouldn't all Albertans have access to a health spending account? And what do they allow you to do? If you go onto the CRA, there's probably hundreds of different services that are not paid for right now out of a publicly funded plan. And so if you want to go to a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, a dietitian, a psychologist, a mental health expert, there's a whole range of not only services, but also getting home care, having a caregiver aid, different medical equipment. And so I want to find a way to facilitate us being able to help people pay for those things that they have to pay 100% for. So that's the context of why I want to bring in a health spending account. I campaigned on it during the leadership. We're still working out the details of how it would work, but it's to enable more comprehensive coverage so that we're helping to defray the cost of things that people have to pay for out of pocket. That's the context of it, that I made that comment, is that we need to empower people to have dollars in an account so that they can pay for more of the things that they need, exactly like the public service and the politicians already have.
Except that's not at all what she said. What she said at the time was very, very clear. And we'll pull up the audio clip for our next episode just to really hammer it home. But she was very clearly talking about user fees for accessing primary care physicians, period. Now, there's a lot to unpack in what Smith said there. First of all, the NDP has been criticizing Danielle Smith's plan that she campaigned on less than a year ago for years. We've got a pretty loose relationship going on with the linear nature of time right there out of the gates, because Danielle Smith has only been premier for a couple of months. She only announced these plans less than a year ago. It was in April 1st, appropriately enough, that she launched her campaign. So how the NDP could be criticizing Danielle Smith's plan for bringing in user fees for primary care physicians or her health spending account for years, how they could have been criticizing those for years, we're using some words that maybe aren't necessarily so much related to the truth. But there's some other things that we want to unpack there. First of all, she said the health spending account, Rachel Notley has one. The public service has one. Politicians have one. There's some impressive messaging going on there, because what Danielle Smith's doing there is, rather than saying, hey, you know what? Elected officials just like me have health spending accounts. She's making it sound like, by leaving herself out and focusing on Rachel Notley and focusing on the public service, she's making it sound like, hey guys, I feel you. I'm just like you. It's Rachel Notley that has the health spending account. What are you going to do? When the reality is, if Rachel Notley, as an elected MLA, has a health spending account, so does every single UCP MLA. So does every single UCP cabinet minister. So does Danielle Smith. But rather than own that fact and talk about how perhaps it should be everybody gets one, just because that's almost sounds like socialism, but what's a boy to do? She's making it an issue of the wealthy, the elite are the ones that have this health spending account. It's the leftist unions, rana, that have this health spending account. Danielle Smith, she's not talking about the fact that she has one. So that was Danielle Smith's radio show. But it was still, even without the radio show, quite a week. Because one of the other things that we saw come up was Grand Prairie. They've been talking about the fact maybe they want to have a break from the RCMP. Maybe they want their own municipal police force. And Danielle Smith said, "Hey, you know what? If you guys want to go the route of having your own police force, we'll just throw money at that because we want the provincial police force thing. That's gotten some pushback. But if we can get some municipalities who maybe want to sign up, maybe we throw some money their way. Maybe we get the RCMP out. Maybe we get to have our own little sovereign police force after all." She even went so far as to float the idea on her radio show this week that maybe, the new provincial police force, maybe that's just going to be the sheriffs. These are the same sheriffs that we've seen deployed in Edmonton to deal with the public disorder. These are the same sheriffs we've seen deployed to Calgary now to deal with the rampant public disorder. A lot of money going into pushing the RCMP out. $10 million, nothing to sneeze at. Moving on from there. One of the good pieces of news this week is Danielle Smith's pumping the brakes on the R-Star a little bit, maybe. Turns out it's a little bit more complicated than she thought when she proposed the program. Turns out a lot of people, a lot of Albertans, not big fans of paying oil and gas companies to do the things that they said they were going to do. We're slowing things down. Danielle Smith came out and said that it's going to be at least until after the election before they look at putting this program in. Now, there are some people affiliated with the Premier's office who are saying, see, so this means that the election isn't about, this isn't about R-Star. We're gonna have an election on other things. We're gonna have an election on who's going to be the best government and stopping the NDP and all of that sort of stuff. But it actually makes this next election more than anything about the things that Danielle Smith and UCP have talked about. They very clearly signaled their intention to go ahead with these things, but they haven't done them yet. Even Don Braid went so far as to ask the question, the UCP, they're not being super clear about what they're going to do with the pension or the R-Star or the provincial police force. They're deferring all of these things until after the election. They're kind of hedging right now because they're only a couple of months away from an election. But what happens if they're free and clear to do whatever they want for 4 years? If they drop these issues now, maybe the electorate, the voters, the vast majority of Albertans who don't pay attention to politics 24/7, maybe they forget about it. Maybe they don't find out what this R-Star thing is. Maybe they don't find out that Danielle Smith has said that she wants to bring in user fees and this $300 health spending account. Like that would make a dent in just about anything. Maybe they forget about those things. Maybe we can just have a campaign on how terrible Rachel Notley and the NDP are. It's very clearly what they're hoping for. And they want to fight with Justin Trudeau too. But it really increases the stakes of the election in a lot of ways. Because at the end of the day, if the UCP get elected with a 4-year mandate, there's literally, as we saw with the curriculum, as we saw with so many of the other programs that they introduced, as we saw with them rolling back protections on GSAs, if they go ahead and do that, there's nothing to stop them. If they get that 4-year mandate, there's nothing to stop them. So more than anything, this election should be about all of the things that the UCP has said that they're going to do, but they haven't quite gotten around to doing yet. Now, one of the other things that the UCP announced this week had to do with an investment in addictions and mental health. So Danielle Smith announced that there's going to be $275 million going into addiction and mental health services. It's all part of her chief of staff, Marshall Smith. He's got this grand vision, 10-year plan for addictions and mental health in Alberta, dealing with the opioid crisis. Except we've seen the UCP pretty clearly signal the things that they're not interested in pursuing. They want a abstinence-based program. They don't want to talk about harm reduction. We've seen over the last almost 4 years, the UCP has gone out of their way to vilify the actual things that can have a real life-saving impact on people who are dealing with addictions issues in particular. They closed the busiest supervised consumption site in Alberta by many measures in Canada and North America in Lethbridge under false pretense. They accused them of losing millions of dollars that they hadn't lost. They didn't reopen the service after they found the money. They kept it closed. We've seen them move supervised consumption sites from areas that they would be utilized to areas farther away, and then pivot to, oh, the disorder. So there's a lot of people wondering, where's this $275 million going? And there's a lot of indications that it's going to be going to privately run for-profit treatment centers, which is, again, quite problematic, because when you take a look at the evidence of how a lot of these centers have worked historically, the results aren't so great. There was even scandal, as we've talked about on the show before, regarding Danielle Smith's chief of staff, Marshall Smith, no relation, when he was running a center in BC. There were accusations that he was using people who were being treated there to do political operations. There were accusations that there were contracts being awarded inappropriately and that there were people who were skimming off the top. All of these things should give people pause as to when we start to go for a for-profit model. We need to remember that at the end of the day, the underlying principle, the North Star, is going to be the for-profit piece. And speaking of how maybe we see people handing out contracts in inappropriate ways, another news story broke this week where a firm that was led by Danielle Smith's former campaign manager was awarded a $72,000 provincial contract. Now, this is actually a pretty big deal in a bunch of different ways. And we have to get into the weeds a little bit with it, because there is some minutia that's important to appreciate. One of the first things that you need to understand about this sort of story is that what we're talking about is something called a sole sourced contract. Usually when the government says, hey, we need somebody to make widgets, they put out a request for proposal, RFP, and they say, hey, everybody, all the widget makers, we need some widgets over here. Would you give us your proposal? Tell us what's the deal on the widgets that you're going to give us here. And we've seen with the UCP government over and over and over again that they play a little bit fast and loose with how those get allocated. We saw with the masks when they went ahead and purchased hundreds of thousands of masks for kids across the province. There was a little bit of questionable activity that went on in regards to how one of the organizations that got a contract got that contract, because they weren't the most affordable, they weren't the fastest, but they did happen to be donors of Adriana Lagrange's. They did happen to live and run their organization out of her constituency. So there's problems and questions historically. But when we're talking about sole source contracts, that's when the government ignores that RFP process. And they say, you know what? We could go about getting the best value for the taxpayers' dollar, or we could just spend the money how we want to spend it. And when we're talking about the sole source contract that was awarded to Danielle Smith's ex-campaign manager, that's what happened. So there was no RFP. There was no, hey, we should try to be as responsible as we can with taxpayers' dollars. It was, hey, you know what? Who would be great at this? I know a guy. And it's pretty problematic because there's a lot of questions that exist in regards to how did that contract play out. And there's even some speculation as to, was that contract even renewed? The contract was supposed to be over at the end of January. But if you take a look at Nordic Media's social media, they posted a lovely little post about how Matt and Bryce were in Ottawa living their best lives, having a great time, looking at those flags. There's only so many events that we could be talking about, and it lines up perfectly with the First Minister's Conference that Danielle Smith went to and filmed her very racist, very whitewashing video where she talked about the the very whitewashed version of Canadian history that she wanted to present that caught criticism from across the country. So there was media production going on during the First Minister's conference. We've got Danielle Smith's company, Danielle Smith's ex-campaign manager's company, who's bragging, apparently, about being in Ottawa, apparently at the First Minister's conference at the same time. It'll be interesting to see what further reports CBC is able to come out with it, because it's not like it's the first time that Danielle Smith has very clearly shown that she likes to help people out. But even then, it's worth talking about the type of content that Nordic Media produced. One of the things that was included in the story was this meme right here. And here we have we're talking about the Sovereignty Act. So Danielle Smith hired Nordic Media to say, hey guys, Sovereignty Act, it's the best thing ever. She had a constitutional expert who said it was totally constitutional, even though there were boatloads of other constitutional experts who said, yeah, it's actually really not. In the format that you've proposed, it's a constitutional train wreck. It's not constitutional at all. But they found a guy who said, yes, I'll appear on your meme. There was also a national lawyer, Keith Wilson, KC, who said, I have reviewed Bill 1. The truth is, Danielle Smith standing up to Ottawa's anti-Alberta policies will encourage investment and more jobs in Alberta. Now, there's a couple of questions that have to be asked right out of the gates. The first one is, why is a lawyer making economic predictions? One would think that would be the purview of an economist. The other question is, hey, who's this national lawyer? Well, it looks like this national lawyer keeps some fascinating company, because recently the extremely problematic German elected official, Christine Anderson, did a little tour in Canada. One of the first stops, she touched base with a few folks. We're going to be talking about a couple of them as we go. Tamara Leach, one of the main organizers of the Freedom Convoy, and courageous lawyers, Keith Wilson. So let's just recap to be really, really sure here, because what we have is this media company, Nordic Media, getting a sole source contract to produce, I guess, memes. And the best people that they could find, one of the best people that they could find to speak to the validity of the Sovereignty Act, is a national lawyer who hangs out with Tamara Leach and Christine Anderson, who is part of an organization in Germany that is profoundly Islamophobic and, in fact, writes policies based on that. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, because it turns out there's a lot more sole source contracts that were going on. The NDP released a statement where they talked about that Danielle Smith gave a $35,000 contract to One Persuasion, which was founded by former federal conservative party strategists and advisors. They gave $35,000 to it just because. And they gave it to an organization using that sole source contract that has previously come under scrutiny from the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner for inappropriately sharing personal information with a third party, leading to concerns about the company using information for political purposes. So Danielle Smith was able to identify, hey, there's this company that has has been accused of having sketchy information and maybe using it for other reasons. We should give them tens of thousands of taxpayers' dollars, because of course we should. But as we said earlier, this is on brand for Danielle Smith. This isn't new. When Michaela Frey stepped down to allow Danielle Smith to run in Brooks Medicine Hat, because Brooks Medicine Hat deserved representation. That's what was said at the press conference. I'm not making that up. She was offered and given a job as a consultant for the Premier's office. So she's making bank. Preston Manning, her mentor, got given $250,000 for himself and a $2 million panel to spend money as he sees fit to look into the legislation around pandemic response. There's plenty of examples where Alberta appoints oil patch veterans to advise government on province's energy future. There's a lot of it's who you know that determines how you get paid going on in Alberta right now. And perhaps we don't have to look even very far for another example, because Catherine Brownlee, the current president of the Alberta Enterprise Group, and if that name sounds familiar, you know why. And if it doesn't, we're going to tell you why in just a second. They've got an event. Their keynote speaker is Danielle Smith. They've got a platinum sponsor, Shane Holmes. I'm just going to let that go and say, if you Google Shane Holmes and the name Nenshi, there's a rabbit hole you can fall down for a while. But wait, there's more, because there is an exclusive. When you buy your ticket, if you are an AEG member, you get a member meeting only with Premier Smith. That's right. Danielle Smith is providing exclusive access for AEG members for a meeting with her that you can buy tickets to if you're a member. A little bit pay for play, but okay. It would really only be a problem if Danielle Smith had some sort of long-standing relationship with this group. It would really only raise eyebrows if she had deep ties to this group, like, I don't know, being the previous president. Oh, wait, that's right, she was. On April 23rd, 2021, almost a full year before she announced her leadership bid, Danielle Smith was appointed the president of the Alberta Enterprise Group. And she made a meal of it, because not only is that where she started advocating for the R-Star program, but she actually rebranded for a period of time her own podcast. It went from being the Danielle Smith Show to the AEG podcast. And she used that podcast to push a bunch of different things, not the least of which is R-Star, where she talks about the fact that she has this conversation with Chris Kinnear, who's the founder of Sustaining Alberta's Energy Network, who's the biggest advocate for R-Star, who was her campaign organizer, who has since gotten a contract for special projects with the Premier's office. It's all perfectly normal. But speaking of relationships that maybe raise a little bit of an eyebrow, there was another announcement that came out this week, because the Calgary Food Bank got a new CEO. And that name seems just a little bit familiar. And it turns out there's very good reason for that name to sound just a little bit familiar, because the new CEO of the Calgary Food Bank is none other than the wife of Derek Fromm. From potato. Derek Fromm is one of the architects of the Free Alberta strategy. The pivotal document, idea, philosophy, I'm not sure what to call it, that Danielle Smith based her entire campaign on. That ex-PC / Wildrose / PC MLA and lawyer Rob Anderson was also one of the architects and authors of. Same Rob Anderson, who's now the Danielle Smith's right-hand man in the Premier's office. And Derek has some interesting, other than his direct ties to Rob Anderson, other than his direct ties to Danielle Smith and her GoFundMe, because if you recall, when the GoFundMe all went down, so we're talking about the GoFundMe for a legal challenge that Danielle Smith put together, when that all went down, there were some people who asked, hey, you raised over $100,000 for a lawsuit that never happened. What you gonna do with the money, Danny? The person who spoke to that? Mr. Fromm. But Mr. Fromm has some interesting perspectives on some things. From his social media, he talks about the fact that they estimate for Israel and Australia alone 13 million. Sorry, that's worldwide. They estimate that 13 million people were killed by COVID-19 vaccines to date, which is just not true. But if we're dealing with the realm of things that aren't entirely true, or at least for questions, Mr. Frome also claims on his social media that despite the fact that he plays in a death metal band, he started to experience some hearing loss, which he attributed to the vaccine. But of course, it goes farther than that, because when we take a look at has Melissa Frome done anything with the provincial government prior to this? Because before she took over as the CEO for the Calgary Food Bank, she worked with Junior Achievement. She did some other things too. She was one of the consultants, one of the curriculum advisors for the catastrophic curriculum that Jason Kenney and Adrienne LaGrange tried to bring in very, very early. And as CBC reported, she was actually brought back to be a consultant for the remainder of the curriculum, not just the K through 6. So she's got a long-standing relationship with the provincial government when it comes to these sorts of things. But one can't also wonder, hey, did Junior Achievement benefit at all from that arrangement? It turns out they did. Junior Achievement received $250,000 per year for 3 years in order to build programs to support the financial literacy for students across the province. Now, obviously, there's no immediate direct ties saying smoking gun, hey, look, Melissa Frome landed this new super Gucci gig for the food bank after Derek did a very good job of being a very good death metal poodle for Danielle Smith with her GoFundMe and all of the other things. And after Rob Anderson, who was his previous legal partner, there's nothing to say any of that. It's just some fascinating, let's call them coincidences. Moving on from there, but continuing on the topic of education, the Alberta Teachers Association put out a little tweet today that's more than a little bit alarming. Alberta's education workforce is just 3/4 the size of the national average based on student population. Large class sizes continue to plague the public, separate, and francophone systems, and students don't get the education supports that they need. And then they threw up a couple of graphics with this press release. One of them is really quite striking. Alberta ranks last in Canada for public spending on public education. Alberta would need $1.2 billion with a B in K through 12 education funding to bring spending up to the national average. That's impressively bad. Teachers in Alberta have more students than teachers in any other province. Alberta's education workforce is just 3/4 the size of the national average. Danielle Smith's doing a lot of talk about all of the things that we should be investing in. But it seems very clear. One of the biggest things that we should be investing in, because we are behind literally the entire country. Despite the fact that we've got the cheapest gas prices in the country, as Danielle Smith is so fond of saying. Despite that, we have the most underfunded, overcrowded education system in the country, it seems. That's a real problem. Because we're talking about the future workforce. We're talking about the future minds that are going to drive Alberta going forward. But Danielle Smith wants to throw $100 million to pay oil companies and gas companies to do the work that they promised that they were going to do in the first place. Just a couple more, and then we're going to be bringing Sarah Biggs in for a little bit of commentary, a little bit of analysis. And we got to talk about this story because it's lit up the social media universe, the Twitter sphere, if you will. A lot of people are going, National Post, what the hell are y'all doing putting up this little story? So the National Post published a editorial I really don't know what to call it. An interview? A puff piece? I feel like when the subheading is Dishing with DKG, it should tell you a little bit about the quality of discourse that we're talking about. But we need to talk about it anyways, because DKG stands for Donna Kennedy Glanz. And she wrote this piece where she sat down with Tamara Leach. And it almost reads like a bit of a polishing or a cleanup of Tamara Leach's public persona. The piece is described as part of a new conversation series. And it really tries to soften the public perception of convoy organizer Tamara Leach. Now there's a trial coming for Tamara Leach. But nonetheless, Donna Kennedy Glanz decided to sit down and talk with Tamara Leach, where she talked about, hey, my views have really softened. And, I kind of was a separatist, but then, I met all these folks from Quebec and, gosh, they were super great. So I really don't know. I think Canada needs to stay united. I'll read the exact quote. Talking to Quebecers, and they had 1,000 truckers ready to go, and it's surreal. And I had this epiphany moment. This has all been a lie. The Quebec versus Alberta division. In that moment, I realized they don't want to leave Canada. These are good people. So her trial is set for September, and the piece goes on to talk about how Tamara Leach was arrested. Donna Kennedy Glanz talks about how she's not a criminal lawyer. She did corporate law. But the fact that there's even conversations about jail time for Tamara Leach, well, that's just over the top. Never mind that Tamara Leach was one of the organizers of the convoy who had the stated mission of trying to overthrow the federal government. Jail time for that just seems a bit harsh to Donna Kennedy Glanz. And then she goes and Tamara Leach talks about how she was arrested and she was thrown in a dungeon. It was a literal dungeon, she says. Now, jail's not a nice place. Jail cells are not nice places, but to equate them as being dungeons, maybe you need to visit a real dungeon just to take a look, because the conditions, they're not the same. The article ends with Tamara Leach saying that she's going to be launching a flurry of lawsuits against people who have called her white nationalists or saying that she supports pedophiles. She says they're going to get sued. Haha. Jagmeet Singh called her a white supremacist. Justin Trudeau called her a racist. And Marco Mendocino accused her of trying to murder people. Tamara Leach's comment is, I'm not finished. It's just going to get fun now. Donna Kennedy Glanz ends with, they are messing with the wrong grandma. So it seems pretty obvious that this is a bit of a rehab piece. But the problem is, Tamara's been doing some stuff on her own, because if you remember from the tweet that we highlighted earlier, here she is hanging out with Christine Anderson, the Islamophobic, hard right politician from Germany, hanging out with convoy lawyers. Lots going on there. But of course, as always, there's a lot more to talk about. It's worth thinking about who wrote this piece, because a lot of people will be wondering, who is Donna Kennedy Glanz and why is she talking about Tamara Leach with such fondness? Well, Donna Kennedy Glanz was elected to the legislature, and she was actually an associate minister of electricity and renewable energy. She was elected with the Redford government, and she had quite a, let's call it, dynamic career up until this point. Because when she was with the PCs under Redford, she was one of the 8 PC MLAs and cabinet ministers who accompanied then Premier Alison Redford on a flight in a government fleet aircraft to attend a PC party fundraiser in Grand Prairie on October 25th, 2012. So she's directly tied to the accusations that ultimately lend to the end of the Redford government. There are a lot of people who did not like the Redford government's cronyism, the Redford government's use of taxpayer resources to say, hey, we're better than everybody else. Donna Kennedy Glantz was one of the people who flew up on that plane for the fundraiser, for the partisan fundraiser on a government plane that had absolutely nothing to do with government business. Now, after the whole, let's call it a shitstorm, kicked up, Donna Kennedy Glantz briefly resigned in protest of the leadership of Alison Redford. And then once Jim Prentice took over, then she came back. Now, she's done a few other things that are worth talking about as well, because she actually ran to be leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party after the whole implosion in 2015. That's the same leadership race that Jason Kenney ended up running in order to merge the Wild Rose with the PCs. He needed to be leader of both of those parties in order to make that happen. He was able to do that. And Donna Kennedy Glantz actually withdrew as a candidate and kind of hopped on Team Kenney. So much so that she ended up being part of the transition team for Kenney when he won. Now, there's some other things that she ended up doing as well. In 2019, she was appointed to the Banff Center as the vice chair. And that's a pretty Gucci gig. But there were some problems, and it's worth talking about what those problems were. Ultimately, she was removed from the role. These are her words on the screen right now. She wrote an opinion piece for Alberta Views on November 1st, 2021, where she said, it was a CBCI opener interview at 7 a.m. on Friday, May 14th, 2021, that triggered my demise. You may recall that the month when the normally reserved MLA from the Peace County, Todd Loewen, had declared his utter frustration with the leadership of Premier Jason Kenney. I was invited to the CBC talk show to fill in some of the color on what it's like on the inside in caucus for situations like this. For the last 4 years, I've been a regular on CTV and CBC, offering up political commentary from an Alberta perspective. When asked my opinion on what advice I'd offer to the Premier in this situation, I suggested that he should listen to his critical friends. Pretty tame stuff. So let's just be really clear there. Donna Kennedy Glantz came to the aid of Todd Loewen, who also ran for the UCP leadership, who is an avowed anti-healthcare protections all throughout the pandemic. Todd Loewen, who has spread all kinds of conspiracy theories about the World Economic Forum and all kinds of conspiracy theories about vaccine safety. That's who she was backing up on that day. Now, things get really, really complicated from there because one of Danielle Smith's besties, a guy who had previously donated to the Wild Rose, and he's the guy behind the whole train to Banff thing. He was also on the board, and he said, hey, you got to resign. If you don't resign, then I'm going to get the government to rescind you. And she said, I'm not resigning. And then the government did rescind her thing. And that's the story so far. But here's the other thing. And this is where this piece, this rehab piece, for lack of a better term, by Donna Kennedy Glantz in the National Post didn't seem to do any kind of background fact checking, because in the piece, Tamara Leach talked about, Quebec, it's all manufactured. We got to keep Canada together. I don't want to see Quebec get kicked out of Canada. Canada's the bestest. I'm not a separatist anymore. Well, let's turn the clock back a whole 4 months, because 4 months ago, Tamara Leach appeared in an interview piece, I guess you would call it, with none other than Pastor Artur Pawlowski, who was, at that time, the newly elected leader of the Independence Party of Alberta, where they talked about the importance of independence. This is the fundamental problem, is that we have so much revisionist history going on. where we have this group of people who will say one thing when it's convenient and another thing when it's convenient, and then a third thing when that's more convenient. We see it all the way through Danielle Smith's government. And it's something that goes back farther and farther and farther. The revisionist history of trying to recast Tamara Lich as a grandmother who just is into fitness, who got caught up in this whole thing and wasn't a key organizer, is disingenuous, because Tamara Lich was front and center at the press conferences. She was front and center of the fundraising of a convoy that occupied Ottawa, that caused the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act, that has been found to have been justified. Part of the same movement that saw borders blocked, not only in Eastern Canada, but in Alberta, where there were murder plots to kill law enforcement officers. That's the real history. So as much as for reasons that defy reasoning, I guess, we have Donna Kennedy Glantz, ex-PC MLA and associate minister, coming out and doing this rehab piece for Tamara Lich. It doesn't change the fact she led and organized a convoy that went to the capital of our country in order to try to overthrow the government. And they only dropped that position once it became clear that they weren't going to get support. They stayed in the capital. They disrupted the capital. There was violence, contrary to how many people will be like, oh, there was no violence. I didn't see any violence. Well, there was. You can deny it all you want. It doesn't change the reality. The literal report is in on this thing. It's sad to see somebody who used to be a minister of the crown, associate minister of the crown, backing up this kind of behavior. But as we've seen from the rest of the episode, it's pretty on par with the Danielle Smith show. All of that being said, it's time to bring in the incomparable Sarah Biggs. Sarah, I'm going to ask you to unmute your mic first, because the last 3 shows, you're already there. You got it already?
I got it.
Yeah, you did. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic tonight. What's going on?
You know, it's a weekend.
It is a weekend.
Maddie started her baby CrossFit. No, she's climbing everywhere.
Baby CrossFit? That's a thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like ninja / carrying little medicine balls everywhere and walking on like little balance beams and hanging on things, but now she's just climbing everywhere. And I had to remind her today that the bar on the oven was not a climbing bar. So everything's great.
You opened up that. Let's start from the beginning and work our way back. So we saw Danielle Smith had a radio show. She was asked to clarify her stance on fees for doctors, and her response was, Rachel Notley gets a health spending account. Everybody should get a health spending account. Why do you think it was that we didn't see Danielle Smith just come out and say, I mean, the answer is pretty obvious, it seems, but why do you think that Danielle Smith didn't just come straight out and say, you know what, there will never be fees to see your primary physician in Alberta? We wouldn't do that to you. That's not who we are. Rachel Notley's a dirty liar. How come she didn't do that?
Because her intentions were clear. Let's put it that way. We're seeing little trickle downs of, privatization of healthcare, right, left, center, like tiny little itty bitty parts right now that are being privatized, and we're gonna have to pay close attention to the budget on Tuesday. We're gonna have to pay close attention to their healthcare platform, because I think that it's I personally think we're going to go back to school vouchers and to condoms.
Oh, don't say that.
I know, but
She has said in the past, vouchers, that's a thing that people have said that our membership voted on. Albertans didn't vote on it, but their membership voted on it as a policy. So
yeah, it matters, right? I don't know. It's why did she not say? I don't know. I would have to re-listen to the piece, but clearly it's in the mind somewhere at the back that they're going to try to.
she just word saladed her. I could play it back for you, but it's 2 minutes long. She just word saladed
No, I don't want to. I'm in a good mood today. But no, I think that we're going to see some attempts to privatization. How could I explain it? It's going to be very subtle. It's going to be very slow and low. It's going to be
putting $250,000 towards addictions and mental health. That's very clearly not going to be infused entirely into the public system.
No, they're going to have to rely on, private care for that, just like long-term care when they're investing more long-term care. Okay, well, we don't have enough public facilities, right? It's like when they're saying they're increasing MRIs. Well, start by staffing the hospitals properly so the MRIs can run 24/7. And then, sure, like I remember I needed an MRI for my knee that they wanted to wait. I think it cost me $750, I think.
Well, your health spending account would have almost covered half of that.
I'd rather the money go to the people that need it, to be honest. It's going to be disproportional healthcare, unfortunately. It's going to be, everything looks like it's going to be a battle. I'm just waiting for their platform. It's always in the fine details, right? The devil is always in the details, and we need to pay extreme attention on both sides. It's not going to be easy to decipher. We're going to have to be hyper vigilant, and we're going to have, you and I will have to do more breakdown of the platforms. And the budget on Tuesday is just going to be.
Wednesday's show is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to having to do a lot of reading between Tuesday and Wednesday.
It's my birthday on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, happy birthday. You get to do a budget review.
Yeah, I'm changing decades.
30?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. 30 it's a good decade.
I heard. But no, we're going to have, we're going to be able to talk more about it after the budget comes out. Then when we look at the numbers, we're going to be, because the budget tells a story, right? Everybody has a story. So I'm going to be able to talk on it a little bit more when we're going to see the budget. I heard that it was an austerity budget. So we're going to have to see if the person who have talked to me,
But we've got more money than God, they keep saying.
And it's all being pissed away to the deal and gas companies.
Well, that's true. Got to pay for that R-Star program somehow. Speaking of R-Star, what's your take on, from a political strategy standpoint, they've taken their most contentious issues, the provincial police force, the Alberta pension plan thinger.
Their whole platform?
The whole platform. R-Star. They're kicking that all down the field. We don't want to deal with that right now. It's very complicated stuff. It takes more than 5 minutes to implement, despite the fact that she promised that she'd fix healthcare in 90 days. Turns out maybe there's some things that are more complicated than Danielle Smith thought on her little locals live stream.
Of course.
It's shocking, really. I mean, next thing you know, she's gonna find out that Ukraine no longer possesses nuclear weapons. It's just it's a crazy, crazy world we live in. That tweet yesterday was gross. I'll just call it out all day, every day.
I didn't see it.
She did the UCP stands in constant solidarity with Ukraine, and they all stood together with a little flag and everything. And it's like, less than a year ago, you were saying that Ukraine really should just be neutral and they shouldn't have nuclear weapons anyways, when anybody who has access to Google and Wikipedia could tell you that all of the nuclear weapons that ever lived in Ukraine were repatriated before 2001. But let's not do any research before we start getting into major, complex, geopolitical, global conflicts. Let's just speak out of our asses.
Proper research is the political enemy of the far right. Look
It's
at
true,
what
though.
happened with what's her face, Christine Anderson.
Well, we're going to get into that in a bit too.
Mhm.
But before we do, is it a good strategy for the UCP to take these major issues that are starting to get some traction, kick them down the field, and hope that the
We're
general
going to forget about it.
well, obviously we're not going to because we're those
No.
people, but the general public very easily could be going like, what's an R-star? Is that Elon Musk's new satellite thing? Like, there's a lot of people who aren't engaged in that conversation.
I think we should get a how to maintain political conversations at Easter dinner this year. You know, do a little. It's not good. Like I said, we're gonna have to see what the budget is planning. Like we're gonna have a better idea of, like, even if they don't say it, you are able to look at the line items, you're able to look at everything that is being said, all the text is being included because the budget's like this thing, right? So we're gonna have to skim through, look at everything, look where the funds are being allocated. Is it higher spend than the previous year? And then we're gonna have to run some analysis and run some hypotheses.
Well, it's interesting. Looking at the comments right here, you're not allowed to still. I
No,
see
no.
that there's apparently this a gentleman, Stephen Carter, who claims that on his own podcast that it is a spend budget. So we've got on one hand people saying it's going to be austerity. On the other hand, we have this Stephen Carter, who I assume has some kind of political background, saying that it's going to be a spend budget.
Well, we'll see. Spend. But here's the thing: he might have not spoken. Maybe the person I spoke to, misguided me, or which would be kind of not cool. But the person is, up there in the food chain, and just to look at the video that they have released, Travis was cleaning his old boots.
Well, he's done that for the last couple of budgets, but it's interesting because even
But
with
it's always been austerity budgets, though. That's the thing.
you're not wrong.
But Karen, did Travis Daves put his foot down because he does realizes that the future of the province is now? Did he put his foot down as finance minister and he said, no, we cannot do that, and he stood up to Danielle? That's what I'm wondering in the background, what happened. Because we all heard rumors that, he was trying to book budget meetings without her being there when she was busy. So we're going to see what's going to happen. But, maybe my source is wrong. Maybe my source is right. But I don't know. Probably it's going to be a spend one on certain items. When you're spending more money on certain items are taking flack, right? So we're going to see what they're going to be doing. But
do you think kicking all of those controversial programs down the field
garbage?
is
Run on it. Fucking run on it. Be honest for once. Run on it. That's it.
That's fair. And I want to say to Plain Power, yes, he is sarcastic as hell. Don't read the comments. It's okay. I got it. What do you make of the cronyism? Because we've got this Nordic Media. They get $72,500 for bad memes highlighting convoy lawyers, presenting them as national lawyers.
Mhm.
There's some debate to be had there, I'm sure. My understanding of sole source contracts is that they're supposed to be for a very low threshold or extreme circumstances, and yet,
So I was part of one of those, right?
Talk about that.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the numbers or anything, but
No, but the gist of it.
yeah, the gist of it. So the province was looking for. So I have clients in Europe, in the United States. I have clients in Canada, and last year there was a shortage of COVID-19 tests, and we found COVID-19 tests. And we approached the government, and we were like, hey, if you are ever in need of COVID-19 tests, here we are. And we were one of the very few who were able to bring product into the province. because it takes a C4. You got to work in partnership with other medical supply importers, and then you got to get like the C4 is like an emergency order for authorization to import certain products, and under the COVID-19 crisis. So when those things happen, when there's a shortage of something, there are those, and if we do not take proper actions, those things could be detrimental to the province. So sometimes the government needs to go ahead with a very, one source, because they did the research, they couldn't find any product, or the other products available were not good enough, because let's be honest, some quality of the tests were kind of lacking. But so usually that's when it does. So here's the thing. I don't have a problem with sole source contracts. But when it's like for publicity, and it's like a kid walking around a grocery store, and it's like, it's okay, mom, I got you. Like, it's so bad. It's beyond bad. Like, at least put a good product out. Like, at least put an effort to put a good product. Have we ever seen those commercials? Have they ever used them? I've never seen them.
I haven't seen. I looked briefly. I didn't
I
put a lot
looked
of
everywhere,
effort
and I
into
couldn't
it,
see that. But it's like, there's one thing to have a sole source contract because you need to get something executed immediately to go out in the public. That's fine. But the problem here, like, sole source contracts will happen everywhere, anywhere, with any government, under any allegiance. We can be outraged as we want, It happens on both sides, okay? And that's the end of it. Sometimes you get offered, things in exchange of certain services, and it's everywhere. Okay, so it's not just a UCP thing. It's everywhere across the country. The problem I have with that one is that holy fuck, the commercials were bad, and be like having kids like, it's okay, mom, I got you. Like, fuck off, seriously, they're kids. Then number two, we never see them. We've never seen them. It's just that's the problem I have with it. That's the problem I have with that kind of cryonism, is that when public money is spent for an extremely bad product on something that was not an emergency at all, or it could have been an emergency if they were planning on using them, and see, they didn't use them.
But even then, is if we're talking about affordability, and I am hard pressed to imagine how a kid handing their parent a $20 bill to help pay for groceries is going to make a tremendous difference in the nature of the emergency. Like, it's a big difference. It's a big difference between we needed this ad for humor versus we needed COVID tests.
Like, our kids are giving us because we decided to procreate, some families gets an extra $100. No. Hey, thanks, kid. You're getting me $100 extra a month. Fuck no.
There you go.
Come on. It sounds almost like communism.
Well, I made the socialism joke earlier. What about, like, here's the other one. So we've got Smith. She's attending this exclusive event for the Alberta Enterprise Group, where group members, if they buy their tickets, are going to get exclusive access for I think it's an hour with Danielle Smith. That seems to be a very pay for play kind of thing. Cool, not cool, normal.
It happens everywhere. It always happens. We see it in Toronto all the time on the liberal side. We see it happening. That's the thing. We see it in Vancouver. We see it in Montreal. We see it in Quebec City. It happens all the time. Should we aim to do better because of the current political climate? 100%. We should be even more careful, and we should be drawing more lines in the sand right now, considering how toxic and how misconstrued and misguided everything is, and everybody's so tip of their toes and have very, very, very strong opinions. If I was an elected official right now, I would not even contemplate it, because people are struggling right now. Like, you are literally sending extra money to families because you can't fucking put a cap on electricity rates,
or insurance.
or insurance, or fucking university fees are out of fucking whack. Then
That
you
jar's
need
getting full tonight.
then oh, we're not going to be getting the $25 natural gas rebate, but that's okay. Distribution charges at all-time high, but that's okay. We'll ask for money for access. I think that we need to go back. So how we always say we need to go back to basics. Elected officials does not belong to the ones that can pay $200, $500, $1,000 or $50,000, as lobbyists. Lobbyists are money for access, right? Because we know people, because we know how the system works. Some are good lobbyists, some are bad lobbyists. Some follow the rules, some don't follow the rules. But everything, the way the government that's why I'm trying to, well, not trying to walk away from lobbying, but you got to, I do believe in lobbying for good. Let's put it that way. But at the end of the day, we're asking rich people to give money so they can have access to the premier when our fucking heating bill's $900 a month. Like, fuck, and then we cut the gas tax that removes money out of the coffers of the province for road maintenance. Then when I'm on Deerfoot, my poor car, when I exit the bridge, it's all bumpy. But nothing makes sense anymore. Nothing.
Do you think, like, one of the things that I keep going back to when we see this kind of behavior from elected officials and people in positions of leadership, it's the metaphor that I keep visualizing in my head is like the Chernobyl thing or the nuclear reactor thing, where the water along the cooling rods has gotten a little bit low over the last couple of years. Things are running a little bit hotter than they should be. And one would think that the elected officials, the people in charge, would be saying, we should maybe put some more water in there. We should cool things down, because if we don't, we could have problems, glow in the dark squirrels. But instead, it seems like what Danielle Smith's doing, what a lot of the people in positions of power are doing, are saying, drain the water. We can get paid for that. Am I reading it wrong?
Mm-mm. No. If you need money, call each person individually and ask them to max out on their contributions. So, it's going to be on the disclosure list at the end of the year, but at least you're not parading in front of everybody and shoving down and create, kind of a private meeting environment, because it's almost, for access, what are the intentions of those individuals going there? Are they covering an agenda? Are they trying to get favor? There's a lot of things, like for me, let's say if I call an elected official tomorrow and talk about something, if I name the company, I need to register to the lobby registry. Now, if I don't name the company and I'm just trying to see if there would be interest for investment or to welcome, anything, I do not need to register. But as soon as I name the company, I need to declare publicly that I'm lobbying for a very specific company. Now, the thing is that when you exchange business cards, your company name is usually on there with your cell phone number.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that, we need to clean up the lobbying act. We really do. It's not... As a professional, I would say it would need to be a little bit more stringent.
There we go.
But that's my personal opinion.
Okay. Here's what I want to get your perspective on. I don't want to get you in trouble. It's just one of those like, thing to get a little bit of my 90s CNC Music Factory on, things that make you go, We have a fairly well publicized media announcement the last couple of days that the food bank has a new boss.
I missed that.
Oh, did you?
Oh,
it's spicy. So the new boss is let me make sure I get the name right here because I don't want to get it wrong. The new boss is
Uh-oh.
Melissa Fromm or
Hmm.
Frome.
No. How do
Now,
you spell the from?
From.
Mm.
And
Mm.
yeah, it's the
Yeah,
wife.
it's legit.
So she's the wife of Derek from I don't know what the correct pronunciation is of it. But she's the wife of Derek Fromm, who's the
Mhm.
death metal guy who claims his tinnitus is caused by the vaccines. As an aged punk rocker, I got tinnitus pretty good over here. It's not from the vaccines. It's because I stuck my head in too many guitar amplifiers, and I had an idiot of a drummer hit a cymbal while my head was right beside it one time.
I'm going for my 5th this week, and my 5G works fantastically. But other than that,
There you go. But we got some pretty major ties to Danielle
yeah,
Smith. This Melissa
we're gonna
Fromm.
have to keep a close eye.
We are, but I mean, like, here's the thing: is there cause? Do you think there's cause for at least a raised eyebrow? Because she also was involved in drafting the curriculum for K-6. She was
Mm.
brought back to review it. She was then brought back to to develop the rest of the curriculum. Junior Achievement, the organization that she was the CEO of prior to this, got a pretty juicy contract from the provincial government coming out of those curriculum consultations. Like, at what point is there enough smoke that you kind of go, maybe there's a little bit of fire here?
Do you want my answer?
I do.
That's my answer.
The eyebrows are up, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. I'd be curious how much she's getting paid, and I would be curious to see how the funds will be administered and if the numbers of hampers will be cut down.
Or increased, because I find myself wondering, is this one of those semi-private organizations that's going to get a boatload of funding from the Smith government so she can say, hey, look, guys, I paid for food banks. It's all good.
Maybe. We'll see. It's all in the fine prints, my friend.
It is.
As she eats her apple because she's famished. Sorry.
That's fair. I have the other two that I want to ask you about.
Sure.
You're totally allowed to take a pass. And at the same time, I'll also say to our Twitter Spaces audience, we upgraded the tech again here at the Breakdown. Fingers crossed, we should be able to bring some folks in.
It's okay. Bring on the heat. I'm going on vacation 2 weeks.
Okay, cool. If anybody wants to weigh in from the Twitter Spaces, do the little microphone thinger, and we'll see if we can get you in. We are vetting people now because last week, I don't know if I told you this, Sarah Biggs, but last week we had somebody who wanted to speak, and it was not okay.
No, you didn't tell me. Oh man, I would have just dragged him.
No, it was I think we would have, it hurt some things. So standard rules for anybody who wants to weigh in with Twitter Spaces: be respectful. If you want to swear, Sarah does it, but don't make it the content of what it is you have to say, and no hate speech or anything like that. Otherwise, we'll just shut you off and then say mean things about you after. Yeah. So we saw the ATA classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
We are, according to these numbers, like, I had to read them a couple of times because they're that bad. According to these numbers, Alberta spends the least in the country on education, and has the biggest classroom sizes in the country. That seems very bad.
I'm going to go with super sarcastic right now. That's heavy, hardcore fiscal conservatism. Please read the sarcasm, okay? Getting the most out of our bang for our bucks. And please read the sarcasm. No, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. We're shortchanging ourselves and our future. We shouldn't be doing that. Like, we should be at Quebec's level, for fuck's sakes. Like, we're...
At least.
Like, a lot of my friends in Quebec are teachers. And my grade 2 teacher's daughter is a teacher now, and we're still friends. We've known each other since we're 6 or 7, and so it's been a while. But they have a lot of speech therapy. They have the services are not the same. The stress level is not the same. Like, yes, they're tired. Yes, but I wouldn't say that the distress could be compared. We cannot. The classes are smaller. What was the average for Quebec classes wise?
For classes, it is 8.5 students per educator. In Alberta, it's 16.4. Those are
Yeah.
2021 numbers.
Yeah. So I would like to see. So I think we're going to be running the exercise just for fun this week. We should be looking 10 years back and do some comparables. 2015, 2019, snapshots of when, like, I would like to see snapshots through time since 2015.
That would
I
be
would
interesting.
love it.
We got a Twitter Spaces person.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm excited. Is this? And
ooh.
it's actually Lynn, which is delightful.
I'm going to go sneeze, so I'll be right back, okay?
Okay, you go and sneeze, and hopefully we have Lynn ready to go in here.
Hi, Nate.
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for this.
Well, thank you. What's going on tonight?
Well, you know what? I'm glad that you highlighted this. The sad part of it is that, I'm in Fort McMurray.
Yep.
And we have this ridiculous girl gang Facebook page. And people post the most ridiculous things on there, women. And so I posted exactly what you did. And I had 2 comments and 4 likes. So that has me really concerned, because if the women in this community are not concerned about their friends who are teachers or their kids who go to school, we're going to get Danielle Smith back.
You're not wrong.
But can I add that, sorry, I'm lighting my hope candle, but at the rate we're going right now, we are going to get Danielle Smith back, unfortunately. That's the problem.
So here's the question, Sarah. How would you encourage Lynn and others like her?
Mhm.
How would you encourage her to have those conversations, position those conversations in order to get people more engaged?
I would keep an eye on the ATA Facebook account. We're going to be gearing up election season. There's the budget on Tuesday. I'm sure a lot of unions will have their analysis about their own sector, and then get involved. I'm sure they're going to have events or things across the province with teachers to try to support them and just really try to rally everyone for education, because they've been having the Stand Up for Education website for a while now. So I would keep an eye on that and really try. But unfortunately, Lynn, that's the sad reality of where we're at. Those, and that's why I don't go on those Facebook groups. It's because usually when you're trying to bring something a little bit more, a little bit more difficult to understand, sometimes it doesn't get a lot of traction. Not to denigrate any of the website, but I was told that when I couldn't breastfeed, I was a bad mother. So there's that. Yeah, I know, right? It's breast is best. Okay. Thanks, mental health. But no, I would, talk to your teacher friends, talk to the teachers, support them, get engaged. I'm sure they're gonna have. I think they have safe education signs. Stand Up for Education. I would get one, put on your lawn. Just really get involved with your local candidate. It goes back to what we said last week. Go and help the candidate that you believe that will represent you the most, and that fits the most with your value. It doesn't matter which camp it is. Who do you think will do the job well and represent you in the community well? But people need to get involved. That's where we're at right now. And I
think
totally
there's-
get your opinion, Lynn.
like one of the things that I find sort of effective when you're having these conversations with people is sort of juxtaposing it with something that somebody would normally be proud of. So like the way that I'm going to be presenting those two graphics on my personal social media is hashtag Alberta Advantage. Because there's a lot of people that have that sort of Alberta's the best mentality. And when you confront them with the metrics that actually say
They don't like it.
They don't like it, but it gets them thinking a little bit. And that's maybe, I mean, it's been a couple weeks since I've been right proper canceled, so maybe it's time to do it again.
Yeah.
I don't. Did that help at all, Lynn?
Spaces went out. I was not looking at the comments.
Faces went out, but I'm back.
Yeah, you are.
And I agree with what Sarah's saying, the part that I got, but realistically, I'm in Brian Jean's country.
Yeah.
So the only thing I can do, because I'm not going to have a candidate, I mean, I'm not going to vote for that guy, but is to encourage my friends throughout the province and post on my social media what's actually happening for the people who don't have time to pay attention.
Keep an eye on the Stand for Education website of the ATA. I'm sure they're going to have some updates coming up pretty soon. Support the teachers. Speak up.
I have a lot of teacher friends, so they keep me updated regularly.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. I love what you said
campaign with them.
because that's something that I know you've talked about previously on the show as well when you've tagged in. Just because the constituency that you live in may not have a great shot at not going UCP or whoever else, that doesn't mean that you can't impact the conversation. That doesn't mean that you can't influence the conversation. That doesn't mean you can't change some minds with some actual quality information and facts. So I love the fact that you're committed to still doing that. That's awesome.
It's awesome.
When you have acquaintances or friends or whatever from Lethbridge to Grand Prairie, you can still influence things, people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. We got another one on the Twitter Spaces as well. This is like we're setting records like for the last couple months for people tagging Twitter Spaces now that it's actually working. So I'm very excited about that. Gnosis, I think. I apologize if I don't know if the G is silent or not. What's going on, man?
Hi, howdy. Yeah, everything's going good. Sorry if you hear my printer in the background. I'm printing stuff, as a printer does.
Is it like one of those old school dot matrix ones that does like the whole R2D2 noises, or is it just gonna quietly hum?
No, it's fancy, but it's fancy and still shit, like printers are, you know. They're capitalist masterpieces because you have to constantly pay for the ink, and that's where they get you. But I wanted to talk today about the implications of, the policies that Danielle Smith has sort of been proposing. Like, generally, fiscal conservatism is also contrary to the objectives of her base. Like, underfunding education is probably not good when most of your audience has children. Most of them are stay-at-home moms that are terminally online that usually get dragged into this conspiratorial mindset. And the social impact this has, because we know that there's a steep increase of social isolation due to like the pandemic, as well as just like generally with tech advances and social media, as well as like on most jobs being focused on solitary work. There is not a lot of social interaction going on, which then breeds these parasocial online relationships, one-sided information, as well as antisocial reinforcement. These antisocial reinforcements that she has basically been echoing through her rhetoric and dog whistle. All of this is just a big clusterfuck. I'm sorry to use bad words.
You got to put
you
a dollar in
understand.
the jar now.
Yeah. Sorry. Just to like tie it all back, it's just she is breeding a problem that is setting us back, and she's also trying to seek out investment that is not going to invest in a population that is uneducated, that generally is not going to have, access to greater prospects. You understand?
No, I don't disagree. I mean,
Yeah.
the type of stuff that Danielle Smith is pushing is, I think, unquestionably, at the very least, short-sighted, and I think it's also very exploitive. I think one of the things that we talked about on the show, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarah, but I think one of the things that we talked about on the show is one of the strengths of Smith is she's an incredibly effective speaker, and she's also willing to say anything, and
Mhm.
that allows her to access any audience that isn't aggressively doing the research or aggressively critically thinking. Sarah, am I wrong?
No,
Okay.
no.
Well, that was
It's
easy then.
it's a la Republican that we're seeing right now. There's a lot of it's just so hard to describe right now. Like it's unprecedented. We've never seen that in the country. We've never. This is why conservatives like me are upset because this is not who I am. I believe in strong public education system. I believe in subsidized universities because we know that at the end of the day, it's going to increase our taxpayer base and we're going to be ensuring your future. That's what the kind of, fiscal conservatism, it's return on investment really. And it's putting, individuals, it's a good thing to say good jobs, but good solid jobs for all burdens. But okay, how are you going to do it? Bring on a plan. I don't think that dumbing down. Do you remember when Donald Trump was saying, I love dumb people?
Yep.
Yeah. Look at what they're doing right now. They're taking away every single fucking book. Margaret Atwood published a book that cannot be burnt. That's where we're at, folks. Like, yeah. She had a copy of The Handmaid's Tale that you can't burn it, you can't destroy it. It came out last year. That's where we're at. It's Idiocracy, the movie. This
Oh
is
yeah.
what
Yeah.
I totally agree. We need to invest. We cannot be dumbing down. Are you really in public service, or are you in public service with good faith if you're trying to dumb people down?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
think so.
disagree. We got another Twitter Spaces speaker who's weighing in. Friend
Oh
of
boy.
the show, longtime listener, not first time caller, education advocate, and excellent source of recommendations for audiobooks and other reading materials.
Who's
Andrea,
that?
what's going on tonight?
Hi. Thank you,
Andrea.
Steph. Hi.
Hi.
Gnosis, it's Gnosis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I've heard it before. That's everything that we heard under Kenny and Redford and Klein. And it's it's never worked. Like none of that argument has ever worked. New strategy. We need a new strategy because and there's a lot of stay-at-home moms that don't go down that rabbit hole. I'm one of them. It gives me time to advocate, and yeah, I'm kind of torn up by these numbers actually.
They're pretty bad. Hey, like for anybody who's not familiar with Andrea, we've done a couple episodes with her in the past because she was part of an advocacy group against the curriculum draft. And I mean, the numbers that we're looking at in these two graphics that I've highlighted in the show tonight are they're not great, are they, Andrea?
No, and they're not the whole story either. They're really like that's
It's
really sterile to look at a bar graph, really. You forget.
I agree. And that's why I want to see more. I don't know if you agree with me, Andrea, but I want to see more details into it. I want to see like a 10-year span of how did we get there? What happened? Is it inflation? Is it lack of teachers? It's a whole story by itself. It's not just
It
one.
is worthy of a detective board with strings and pins. I've been trying to untangle that for the last year and a half, and I still can't. But I'm having to make some incredibly hard decisions as a parent right now, and it's tearing me up, gotta say.
But see,
I think
no one should have
sorry.
to fight to get their kids assessed. No one.
Yeah.
If your child's going through some, difficulties at school, emotional, learning, anything, no one should ever, 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 no matter how much money do you have, which area do you live in, no one should ever have to fight and try to justify and write a sub story on an assessment request because you want to make sure your kid gets assessed. No one.
Here's the kicker. You can do all of that and still hit
They'll be rejected.
invisible walls that are barriers to access. You can do all the right things. You can cross all the T's and dot all the I's, jump through the hoops and play by their rules, and still sit there and have to decide, okay, this is just not working, and I'm going to have to make some hard choices as a parent.
I'm going to make a suggestion to the NDP, and that one's for free. Stop using the goddamn word chaos. Start pulling real numbers and some real policies on education. Start talking about something else than healthcare, because education need as much, if not a little bit more attention than healthcare right now, because our healthcare system's under strain, but so is our education system. I strongly suggest them to wake up, stop using the fucking word chaos, and start growing a pair, because what I'm seeing right now is weak sauce. It's weak.
Education is children's developmental health care, and there's no way to dance around that, because it's an investment that will always pay off the more you invest in it early on. That's how development in children works.
Except that you can't get that help early on, because you really can't get an official assessment until they're about 8. So you've lost like 4 years of early intervention already, because the gatekeeping is based on a test that's about $1,500 to $2,000, unless you have benefits or unless you're one of the 3 out of 700 children that qualify that year for the school assessments.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The NDP needs to wake up. If they want to win this, they need to wake up. Stop using the word chaos, because I'm sick of seeing, because I get emails of all the campaigns and all the parties. Stop using the word chaos. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. Get creative. It's chaos everywhere. It's a shit show. Use shit show. I don't know. I don't care. Assert your position. Bring on some real plan, and stop saying that Rachel's going to fix everything. God damn it. Sorry. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Hey, Sarah, I got a question for you. You know what's going on in Calgary tonight, right?
No.
I've
been living under a rock. I've been painting my office.
That's fair. Is anybody doing a speaking engagement in Calgary right now?
Oh, is it Christina Anderson?
It's not. That's not the one I'm thinking of, although she might be there.
Who? Jamie? Sully? Theo? Is it Fire and Ice?
Harper? It's Harper.
It's not Harper. It's not Harper.
No, I would have heard about it. Who is it?
What day is it today? Is it 26th or 27th?
26th.
Okay, just making sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I have to double check this. I thought that wasn't Peterson playing today?
No, I think it's been postponed.
Has it?
Let me do a Google.
I thought it was today. Anyways, here's my question. Are we going to see any pictures of any politicians? February 26th. Yeah, no, it's tonight. Yeah, okay. There we go. I'm not a crazy person. I'm looking at the Jubilee.
It was postponed. No. It got postponed.
It's right here. I got it on
May 21st, 2023, Southern Alberta Jubilee.
I think that's another date, though.
Oh, shit.
because I'm pretty sure he's there tonight. Here's my question, and I'm not asking this because I just got a DM in any way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Are we going to see any politicians posting selfies from the Jordan Peterson event tonight?
Probably.
I can think of at least one city councilor whose picture I have in the Breakdowns DMs right now.
Yeah, I think we're gonna
Are they
see.
going to walk really carefully on the ice down there?
Ooh, I see what you did there.
I thought that was a joke tweet. I legitimately, when I saw that, I was like, no way.
Something's not clicking.
There's a parody account though, right? With the B and the P switched.
Yeah, that's one of the Mean Girls' husbands that holds that account.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm blocked. I think it's our Marxist or something. They all blocked me a while ago. 2 years ago, because I told them to go pound sand. But no, yeah, probably lots of politicians tonight. Do they have meetings in Calgary tomorrow?
I don't know. It's
we should ask. Yeah, no, you know, Peterson is another special butterfly. He's very special.
Right. One more thing about the education, and then I gotta go.
But, yeah, for sure. Sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah. No, school boards never talk about class size.
No.
Or the kids who are getting missed for assessments, or the kids who are behind grade level. They only talk about the success stories, and they don't talk about teacher burnout. School boards do not. They take training on how to talk to politicians, but they won't talk to the public about any of these things that are actually impacting classes right now. And I'm kind of done with it. School boards need to be publicly asked what's going on by the people who elected them.
Yep. You know, we only hear the good. Why would they publicize the ugly? It doesn't look good on them.
Why? Because they're scared.
They are. But that's the thing. It's all about going back.
We all stood together at the same time.
It's all about holding public elected officials accountable. We need to be louder. We need to ask more questions. We need to stop being so complacent everywhere.
We have to hold elected officials accountable for holding elected officials accountable.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a full circle.
Well, thank you, Andrea.
Yep.
I know that you sent a few texts tonight that I have to read, and I will. It's just there's this show thing that I had to do. So, but
and you do it well.
Yeah, thank you so much for. I'm looking forward to seeing what audiobooks I have to listen to after I take a look at those texts. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm on the second run of the last one.
Perfect.
Yeah. There's a little bit of Emperor's New Clothes in it, actually.
That's very appropriate for the political climate these days.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I could go on, but I shouldn't. The kids still got up, so I gotta go back and do it again. And here we go.
All right.
Bye.
Sarah Biggs, you got any other thoughts that you want to share? I think we're well past our hour and a half mark.
Yeah, I still have some work to do. Budget. Pay attention. Very, very close attention.
Wednesday's gonna be fun.
Come on, man. It's my birthday.
If you need to take a pass on Wednesday night.
No,
that's cool.
I won't take a pass on budget.
Well, that's fair. Okay. Well,
no, budget's going to be so important because it's going to give the tone to the election, and then we're going to be able to see the capability of the opposition to, ask proper questions and have proper rebuttals, not dollar store version on a couch, right? Just saying. Don't hate me. I'm just being realistic here.
There we go. Well, maybe we'll see if we can get Twitter Spaces to sing you a happy birthday on Wednesday. Any bets on who the city councilor is? Calgary City Councilor who's attending?
Or Sean Chu. McLean or Chu?
You got one of them.
McLean.
Not saying, just saying.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna
close up.
We're going to tweet that picture. Yeah, I'm going to close it up. I got a couple things I want to talk about real quick because there's some exciting stuff coming down the breakdown pipes over the next little while. We threw it out to the ether. What are the things that you want us to talk about over the next little bit? We got a couple ideas out of that. We're already setting up some interviews. For anybody who's been paying attention to the Alberta politics landscape, Dr. Dwayne Bratt and a bunch of other political scientists have put together a book that they're releasing right away here. We're going to be sitting down with Dr. Bratt this week to talk about the book.
My favorite doctor.
There you go.
Sorry, I love Dwayne. I really love him. He's great. Sorry.
He is super good, but I think that Dr. Young's going to be angry at,
Yeah, but no. But I have lunch with them all the time, and they're both great. They are both amazing. Just saying.
They are. I'm excited for the book launch, and I'm excited to have that conversation with Dr. Bratt. We've also got a couple other spicy little conversations that I think are gonna cause some conversation. So the plan going forward over the next little bit, we talked a little bit about this last episode. The breakdown schedule is going to be a little wonky for the next little while. We're going to still be doing shows on Wednesdays and Sundays. Some of them might be the interviews that we'll be presenting. Those will be pre-recorded, but they'll still be here on one of those nights. We've got a lot of them in the pipes that we're looking forward to bringing you. So stay tuned for those. As always, the first people to get access to those interviews, though, are our Patreon sponsors. It is one of the perks of being one of our Patreon sponsors. As well, you get the added bonus of if you stay a Patreon sponsor for a little while, you get stickers, you get other fun little pieces of merch, and we try to have little bonus things for our Patreon sponsors throughout the year as well. You can sign up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. $5 a month. Doesn't take a whole lot, helps us to continue to produce the kind of content that we're producing here, and as well continue to up our technical game. It was almost a year ago we were told it was impossible, couldn't be done to integrate Twitter Spaces into a live stream on Facebook. We said, we defy you. We defy that. We will figure it out. We did. It's been a little touch and go, but we're getting better at it. So it's because of the support of our Patreon sponsors that we're able to do that. If you're not able to, we get that. The only ask is that maybe leave a like, a review on the podcast area. Share the content that we're producing. All of that stuff is absolutely great and super helpful. Other than that, we're going to be back on Wednesday. God help us all. Coming out of the budget release on Tuesday. Already, that's looking to be an incredibly polarized event because we saw that the NDP had all of their guests moved off of the floor and into the gallery. So there's already a little bit of a back and forth going on with there. We've got a couple other stories that we're working on as well. I want to just say, because we got to, after we threw out the question, hey, anybody got any ideas about things that they want to talk about? We got a couple messages from people being like, hey, is the breakdown still? Are you guys running out of things to talk about? Are you okay? We're doing great, actually.
Yeah.
It's just we like to get you all involved. So that's all that was. We're not fading out. And as we've talked about, we mentioned it, I think it was last episode, we're also looking at the logistics of doing a live audience show. So look for that as well, because we're only going to keep upping our game, and we have some really fun things planned, as well as some serious things planned. It's going to be good. I'm really excited for the conversation with Dr. Bratt, and I'm really excited I'm excited for all of the interviews that we have coming up, but there's one in particular that I think is going to be challenging for me, but I also think it's going to be challenging to a few folks to listen to. It's going to be interesting. As always, in the meantime and in between time, Alberta Politics, it's a dynamic place. Props to everybody who's staying engaged. I want to say a big thank you to our entire almost comments section. Tonight, there were a couple of people who had some thoughts that they wanted to share that weren't very complimentary. That's okay. I get called names on the internet all the time, so it doesn't really bother me. But thank you everybody for standing up there. I want to say a big thank you to everybody on the Twitter Spaces. It's so great to be able to have the engagement on the Twitter Spaces again. A lot of people left Twitter to go to other platforms. I totally get why, but it's nice to see some of that coming back. It makes my heart full. Thank you to all of our patron sponsors. Thank you to everybody who shares the content. Thank you to everybody who continues to be engaged in Alberta politics. Thank you to people like Lynn who are continuing to have the conversations. And even though they live in constituencies that maybe are just doomed to go UCP for the foreseeable future, still trying to spread the word, still trying to get people informed. That is the foundation. I've said it many times before, and I keep saying it. The foundation of any healthy democracy is a well-informed electorate. And anybody who's doing the work to try to make sure that people are getting good quality information as opposed to conspiracy theory, batshit crazy stuff is serving democracy. So thank you for that. As always, in the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves and keep the conversation going.
Thank you.